All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. I'm here today with Alexander Ladd. Alexander is a leader in technology, innovation, and change management. As the CEO of Mindstream Analytics, he has over 15 years in experience in financial software systems and has successfully led more than 50 implementations for companies like Verizon, Bear Corporation, and Time Warner Cable. So, Alexander, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And please call me Alex.
Okay, cool. I will do that. All right, Alex. So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do with Mindstream.
That's a great question. And it's actually a little unique. I have a great friend who called me up one day and said, you should come down and look at this place where I live. We need a new roommate, and I got you a job too. So if someone calls you up with that offer, you have to at least go down and investigate. So I did, and the job was something that turned into something that I was really interested in and was just incredible learning experience and things like that. And it led me to this. So that's how I got into it. It was the job was working for a company building a computer simulation to help to run a business and help people understand reporting and analysis around the business and KPIs and things like that. And it was fascinating. So we just did tons of case studies and things like that and put that into the computer simulation. And all of it just was so much learning. I had never programmed or anything before that. So it was my introduction to kind of everything. So it was really awesome.
So how in the world were you studying computers in college or playing with them, or nothing?
I was a history major. So I could tell you the history of the computer, but that's about it.
Oh, that's funny. And then when you're working with all these companies, we're talking about data and big data and all of these stuff these days. How are you finding that the companies can unlock the power of data to drive operational efficiency and decision-making, specifically in manufacturing?
Yes. So we have a number of manufacturing clients, and I think what you'll find there is if you're a manufacturer, I'm sure you've heard the term. If you're at a manufacturing company, I'm sure you're familiar with J.D. Edwards, or at least have heard the name. I know not everybody uses it anymore, but it used to be used pretty predominantly across the vertical, right? And that's where you start with your data. And then as you move forward, there's just so many things that you can. J.D. Edwards is a great tool. It helps with a lot of the production process and things like that. But when it comes to analytics and unlocking things, J.D. Edwards, there's more. You're going to need more than that, right? So you're going to need a tool that helps beyond that. And I think that's where we come in, and our software partners. And that's really how you can roll that up, how you can cross-section things, how you can just dig deeper into what's coming out of there, and then marrying that up against sales and things like that. It's just, you can drive all kinds of insights and stuff like that.
So if people are not familiar with what J.D. Edwards is, can you give the Cliff Notes version?
Yeah. When you think about it, J.D. Edwards is enterprise resource planning, your ERP, your transaction system. So where you're putting your production scheduling, where you're doing your general ledger for finance, where you're all kinds of things. And it does all of those things. Competitors are SAP. A lot of manufacturers will use SAP, the bigger ones, right? Then there's a lot of different, still use Bain or some of the other, Dell Tech's another one that we see every once in a while. There's other Epicor, although that isn't as big in manufacturing as maybe J.D. Edwards. J.D. Edwards is the older granddaddy of a lot of them.
Okay, good. So when it comes to enterprise performance management, or EPM solutions, how can manufacturers use those to improve their production planning and analysis?
So the production planning piece gets a little dicey, right? Because you need a lot of lower level detail. One of the things that we've looked at is we have a great solution for this is a demand planning module, right? So helping you unwind what you're going to need in your inventory as far as raw materials and things like that based on your production plans. And then it can do that. But then the other thing that it really is going to help you do is planning and forecasting, right? And as you drive that down into your production planning, but also, again, your material sourcing, if you're somebody that creates your raw materials, that's like a mining schedule or something like that, that will help with that as well. And really the great piece about it is that these things are also great aggregators, right? As you build out these lower level plans, they can be aggregated into how it affects the overall organization. So if you have your production plan, are you going to meet your sales plan? Where's the marriage there? Because at some point they have to meet each other, right? Otherwise, you're either just building inventory or don't have enough inventory. So it all has to come together.
So what are you seeing are the biggest mistakes that manufacturers are making when it comes to data?
Not tying it together. So what I was just saying about that, a lot of people, when you think about that and when you think about what people are doing in an organization, there's a lot of times you get people that are doing, all right, I'm going to do the production plan. So I'm working on my production plan and I've got my blinders on and working on my production plan, making it as most efficient as I can. And then you have somebody else who's doing their sales plan, or somebody else over there that's doing their sales plan and they're working on their plan. And then this is what I'm going to sell. And like, where's the two come together? And is there analysis of when you get into the actuals, it's real easy to look at your budget versus actual variance and say, all right, we had this much sales and it varied or whatever. We had this much change in cost of sales or cost of goods. What was that about? All of those things. But is that analysis being combined between those two pieces? A lot of times. And part of that also has to do with like systems and things like that, because you may have a sales system that's not necessarily linked to the system that where you're doing your production planning or your inventory or whatever the case may be. That a lot of that kind of synchronization can be a mistake. And then the other thing that is when you ask about mistakes, is the synchronization right? Is everything being accounted for coming together?
So what other departments would need to talk to each other? You mentioned sales and production, but what are some of the other areas that would need to be tied into?
Delivery, marketing, all of those things, and the coordination across all of those things. Because depending on marketing but you're going to need samples, right? So you're going to have samples and things like that. So you got to produce those. But then like delivery and then sourcing, all of those things I mentioned about the demand planning, right? So if you're going to be producing X number of widgets, you're going to need the componentry for those widgets, right? Does demand planning talk? And demand planning should be talking to sales. Most places get that pretty right? Sales is going to generate your demand plan, right? And that makes sense. But you're always going to end up with manufacturing variances. So that can drive a lot of like, where did those come from? And unearthing that can tell you where your communication's off.
And there's so many systems that are out there, and over time, it seems you hodgepodge them all together. So
totally.
Is this something that you have to start from ground zero, or is there a way to integrate these systems together so it makes the process a little bit easier using, maybe it's even AI? I don't know. I'm guessing.
That's a great question. I love that question. Thank you so much. Because the answer to that is actually the EPM systems can bring it all together. And there's a lot of times where people will invest heavily in data warehouses and things like that, which are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to persuade people not to do that. But if you don't have that, a lot of times waiting for that can set you back on the analysis, because those things they don't go together in a day, right? There's a lot of data integration that goes with that and pieces that have to be ironed out. So that can take a little while, but oftentimes you can do some of the normalization and data mapping, et cetera, whatever you want to call that, extraction, transformation. So you can do some of that transformation in some of these EPM tools or CPM tools, and that can serve as a placeholder until you can build out a larger data warehouse and things like that. Typically, they won't go to the level of detail that a data warehouse will go. They might be a little more aggregated, but it can still point you, but the answers they provide will still point you in the right direction. And you can get there a little faster than maybe with a data warehouse.
What are some of the signs that manufacturers should look for if they're on a wrong track, for example, and they could consolidate things or make their data collection like that, run a little bit smoother?
That's a good question. And I think ultimately it's about educating yourself about what's out in the marketplace around all this. And that we can help with that, but other people I'm sure can help with that too. But there's a ton of these solutions, and then bringing them together and then look at like where you are and what you're spending. And I think the other thing that is, and I don't say this one is not particular to manufacturer. I think there's companies in every vertical that have this problem, and that is people fall into groups of, I'll never get my data. My data is right, even though it's not. And where you got to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself, basically. And that becomes the track piece. So we can do this all in the data warehouse. It's going to take 10 years. In 10 years, it might be obsolete. So let's talk about what can we get done today. And that can be a little harder. And it can be a little harder conversation because the tools that we're talking about with EPM, and a lot of people also now call it with CPM, is those tools are not, they're not something that's right up IT's alley. If you talk to IT, they understand data warehousing. That's something that is a sweet spot for them. So you push what you know, and that makes sense. Everybody does it. That's not a critique. But what you really want to do is trying to get out of that side of that comfort zone a little bit, because some of these other tools can do maybe not more, but they can fill a good piece of that void, but they can do it so much more rapidly than you could with a longer term big data warehouse build out. Do you need everything down to the SKU level? Some companies do, and that's fine. But maybe if you roll it up a little bit, if you have nothing, you can roll it up a little bit and still get a lot of answers as you build out something that's at that lower level of detail. And I don't want to prescribe this as a Band-Aid because I think there is a lot of long-term value in it, but it will go together more quickly.
Okay. What are some of the other best practices to integrate data and analytics so that you can really streamline your manufacturing processes?
One of the things about that is I would say you want to get in front of things around. We talked about different departments talking to each other. The other side, the flip side of that coin is also that everybody's got an ownership stake in something, and so they don't always want to give that up. And getting them to break down those walls is always a big piece. And so sharing of things and everybody looking at the same piece of data is always a huge win, right? A lot of people don't take the time to look at master data. And master data can be a huge improvement on things. So like what you consider as sales and what I consider as sales, or what is product A versus product B, or service line or something like that. Do we all define that the same? And that kind of thing, or this product rolls up into this product grouping or this product family, like that kind of, those kinds of things can change conversations. And that's something that you see a lot of people not put enough energy into, and not necessarily, and because of that, they get a more tortured output, let's say.
It seems to me, and we talk about workplace culture on this show a lot. And when it comes to one thing, obviously, when people are talking to each other, you have a better workplace culture. But what are some of the ways that you can tie this into not only streamlining the operations, but also helping with the workplace culture so that people can attract and retain the talent that they need to do these jobs?
I think that's a great question, and I'm really glad you asked it, because there's a number of things I think about that. Number one is workplace culture. You talk a lot about these days about emotional intelligence and things like that, and it's easier to maintain that. Or you talk about positive and good communication or positive conversations, and keeping a conversation in kind of the sweet spot of moving things forward and getting at value. And all of those things are enhanced or easier to do when you're all talking about the same data. If you're interpreting something, and this kind of goes back to that master data conversation, or the data being the same across the board, right? If you're all looking at the same number, you already know what the conversation is to some degree. So everybody's already, you walk into the meeting, you're already there. Everybody's in the same headspace because they're not quibbling about, my numbers say that we're fine and yours say we're not, or whatever. I think we hit the target, you don't think we did, or whatever. If you're all on the same page, that obviously elevates that conversation because there's no back and forth about what's right, number one. But the other thing is, as we go through, to take it towards that further on in your question, is attract and retain talent. People are getting less and less, and when I say people, employees and just everyone in general in society, they're getting less forgiving of antiquated systems and things that, if people are asking, why is this so hard? Then you're behind. That's going to hurt your retention and attraction right there, right? Because if why is it so hard to get this here is a problem, right? So you almost need that data uniformity and the capability to drive better analytics, because that's what everybody's looking at these days. And if it's something that becomes very difficult, then you're adding extra time that people don't feel is value add.
Yeah, it's so interesting because as you were talking about that, I was thinking about when you have your younger millennials and Gen Z coming in and
That's
they're
who I
like,
was talking. That's what I was thinking about too.
yeah, why are you doing it this way when we could just do it like that and be done with
Exactly.
it? But it also takes the leadership team to be open to new feedback by people who are digital natives and understand the data differently from the people who have been doing it that way for 20 years or 40 years or whatever their number is.
Yeah, and I think that's that you've stumbled on. That's one of my favorite quotes. Was the antiquity of an error is no justification for its perpetuity. Just because you've been doing something this way for 20 years does not necessarily make it the best way to do things. Even if like things change around you, so even if it's been successful, doesn't necessarily mean it will be tomorrow. And that's something I think that you get your Gen Zers and the younger people, and they believe that, right? Because they see it, the pace of change in their life has been it's so much further than what it's been in our life, right? So it is an interesting paradox there.
And is AI playing a role in this, or how is AI playing?
AI is definitely playing a role in this. And if it's not yet, it will be more, right? So anything that if you're saying it's not here in this space yet, it is. And if it's not, it's coming soon. We have a number of customers who are looking at things, and we're building some things out with AI right now. And they want to leverage their AI models to do certain tasks that, again, it's just things that if it's done, it just makes things move faster, which I think is good and bad, right? Because it sounds great, and it faster can be more efficient, and that's fine. But I also think from going back to the employee experience, sometimes I think things are getting a little too fast, right? We all want to take a break, so right, and merry-go-round's going around too fast. But I think, we are seeing that, and there's two pieces to that too, and I would make that distinction. There's AI, and when I think of AI, I think of when people say AI to me, at least right now, I think that's really talking about what they're talking about, large language models. So that to me is more of a textual thing. So write-ups, documents, things like that. So it's more written, that type things. Whereas on the numeric side of things, you talk about more about like machine learning and stuff like that, which is the AI equivalent on the number side, right? And there's been huge upticks in that too. And that I think is actually getting more prevalent right now than AI, just because it had a head start. So it's a little more ingrained already. You'll see that in lots of things already, whereas AI is being added to things right now. Machine learning is already out there and embedded in a lot of things. More's coming, don't get me wrong, but those are the two kind of different pieces. And machine learning is something that you'll see just more and more as we go forward too.
All right, awesome. As we start to get to the end of our time together, is there something that I should have asked you and didn't when it comes to the data and analytics and all these other things we've been talking about?
I think you did, and I forgot to put it in. How's that?
Okay.
And that is, you asked about stumbling blocks and things like that about this. And I'm a consultant, and I'll tell you this. And if you're going to go through one of these things and you want to enhance these things, and you're going to do a project and you're going to hire a consultant or whatever, just remember my big thing is get involved. The customers that are the most successful, in my opinion, are the ones that sit with us the most, that they get the best results because they're the most heavily involved with us while we're doing the project. And I think to me, that is the biggest key. It's easy. We're all busy, right? And it's easy to say, okay, you're going to do this, you go do that and come back when it's done. But the ones that are actually actively involved in the actual doing of it are the ones that end up being the most successful. So.
All right, awesome. If somebody did want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
My email is alad@mindstreamanalytics.com, and my LinkedIn profile is Alex Ladd. Either one works great.
All right, awesome. Good. Alex, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great to be here. Thank you.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.